The iron gates of the mansion towered above her like the jaws of a sleeping beast, cold and merciless. Just like the world had always been to Alara Gray. Her thin hands trembled as she clutched the small paper bag of leftover bread she de-scavenged from the bakery dumpster. Tonight, the winter air cut through her worn coat, and yet she still stood there, staring at the massive estate everyone in the city feared. This was not a place for people like her. This was the home of the Vampire King. Moments earlier, she had been shoved into the muddy street by a passing carriage. Laughed at by two richly dressed girls who called her filthy gutter rat. She ignored the sting in her eyes and the ache in her heart. Alara had learned long ago that crying changed nothing. Survival was all that mattered. And tonight, she had come here with one desperate purpose: to beg for work. Any work, even scrubbing floors for the undead. Her knuckles finally struck the gates. A deep echo followed, then silence. And then a voice, dark and commanding, slithering through the night like velvet shadow. "Who dares interrupt my peace?" The gates creaked open, revealing him. King Lucien Dreven. He stood taller than any man she had ever seen, his presence swallowing the moonlight itself. Long, silver-black hair framed sharp, immortal features. And his crimson eyes looked like they had seen centuries of sorrow and blood. The rumors were true. Ruthless, feared, unfeeling. A monster in royal form. Alara lowered her gaze immediately. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I only ask for work. Can clean, cook, anything. I'm not afraid of hard labor." A laugh echoed from somewhere behind him, a cruel servant's voice. You look like you'd collapse holding a broom." Her cheeks burned, but she remained still. "Please, I won't be troubled." Lucien studied her silently, his expression unreadable. Something flickered behind his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. Or recognition. "Enter," he commanded. Inside, the mansion was colder than the night. Marble floors, silver chandeliers, velvet drapes, luxury that mocked her existence. As she followed his steps, her eyes wandered across ancient halls and forgotten elegance, until they found something that froze her blood. A large painting hung at the end of the corridor. Her breath left her lungs. It was her mother, young, beautiful, smiling, and dressed in a gown she had never owned. Alara stepped forward, trembling. "Why?" Her voice cracked like thin ice. "Why is my mom's photo in your mansion?" Lucien stopped. The entire air shifted. He turned slowly to the portrait, his expression darkening as if ghosts had just whispered his name. "That woman," he said quietly, "does not belong to your world. She's my mother." Alara spun toward him, eyes filling with defiance soaked in fear. "She raised me. She taught me kindness. She saved people without asking for anything. So why is she here? Why does she look like royalty in your home?" Lucien's jaw tightened. "'Cause centuries ago, she saved my soul when I no longer deserved to have one." Silence fell like a blade. Lyra's heart pounded. "That's impossible. She's just a healer. She doesn't remember anything before my childhood." A troubled shadow crossed the king's immortal face. "That is because I erased her memory to protect her from my cursed world." His eyes returned to Alara, sharp and searching. "But you should not exist." Her breath hitched. "I remember the night she vanished," he continued, voice low with buried pain. "She defied my enemies, healed my wounds, and refused the gold of a king. I loved her, and I let her go so she could live as a human." Alara swallowed. "You're lying." "I am incapable of lying under the moon," Lucien murmured. The room seemed to tremble with ancient truth. Outside, thunder growled in the distance, as if the heavens themselves sensed destiny awakening. Lucien took a step closer, his gaze softening in a way she never expected from a being of such feared power. "You carry her eyes," he said quietly. "Her courage, her light. Tears slid down Ilara's cheek. All her life she had been called worthless, invisible, unwanted. And now the most powerful vampire in the realm looked at her as if she mattered. But kindness from monsters always had a price. "You will stay in this castle," Lucian declared, "not as a servant, but as my guest, till I uncover why fate has tied you to my past." "And if I refuse?" she whispered. A faint shadow of a smile crossed his lips. "Then the world outside will devour you before dawn." Ilara turned once more toward the haunting portrait of her mother. Realizing the truth she feared most, her life was no longer her own, and whatever secret lived inside her blood, even the Vampire King feared it. Ilara slept that night in a chamber larger than any home she had ever known, yet her heart refused to find peace. Silk curtains swayed like pale ghosts in the silver moonlight, and the scent of night-blooming roses filled the air, sweet and unsettling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the portrait again, her mother's face radiant and unfamiliar, hanging like a secret in a king's haunted hall. When morning came, she was awakened not by kindness, but by sharp whispers outside her door. "She's human, weak. Why would His Majesty allow her here? She doesn't belong among us." The door opened without warning, and a tall vampire noblewoman entered, her eyes cold as frozen glass. "You will remember your place, girl. His Majesty is merciful, but the rest of us are not." Ilara lowered her head, swallowing her fear. "I never asked to be here." "Then pray you do not disappoint him," the woman hissed before turning away, her footsteps echoing like judgment. Later, Lucian summoned her to the grand library. Towering shelves of ancient tomes surrounded him like silent guardians of forgotten centuries. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, regal and distant. Yet when his eyes met hers, something softened again, that quiet gentleness that did not match his legend. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "A little," she replied softly. He nodded. "Tell me more about your mother, her habits." Her words. Anything she ever said about dreams or shadows? Ilara hesitated, then spoke. "She always warned me never to trust people who called themselves saviors. She said real power protects without hurting. And sometimes she'd wake up crying, whispering a name she couldn't remember. A name that sounded like yours." Lucian's breath stalled for the briefest moment. Then her soul remembers what her mind cannot. He moved closer, his towering presence making her instinctively step back, yet his voice remained calm. "You carry traces of ancient magic in your blood, Ilara Grey. Magic from before kingdoms fell. You are not simply a poor girl struggling to survive. What am I then?" she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes, fear and reverence. "You may be the key to breaking a curse placed upon me centuries ago." Before she could respond, the library doors burst open. A younger vampire staggered inside, wounded, blood staining his tunic. "My king, the Shadow Council has discovered the girl's presence. They believe she is the lost heir of the Moonline." Silence dropped like a curtain of ice. Lucian's jaw tightened. "Take her to the protected wing." Now Ilara's heart slammed painfully as two guards approached. "Wait, I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to survive." Lucian's gaze softened for a brief, dangerous second. "And you will. Even if I must turn this world to ash to ensure it." She was led through hidden corridors into a chamber sealed with symbols glowing faint silver. As the heavy door closed, darkness wrapped around her like a warning. She slid down to the floor, hugging her knees, trembling with confusion and fear. Was her existence truly tied to an ancient royal bloodline? Was her mother not just a healer, but a forgotten queen of some lost fate? Later that night, Lucian stood outside her door, unseen, listening to her quiet sobs. His hand pressed against the cold stone, his immortal heart aching in a way it had not for centuries. "You should have been safe," he murmured into the silence. "Not dragged into the ruins of my past." Inside, Elara lifted her gaze to the ceiling, whispering softly, "Mama, what didn't you tell me?" And somewhere deep beneath the mansion, something ancient stirred, awakened by her presence. A power long dormant began to breathe again. The poor girl who had once begged for scraps now stood unknowingly at the center of a supernatural war, protected by the most feared vampire king, and desired by forces that would destroy worlds to claim her. But one truth began to glow brighter than fear. Lucien was no longer just a monster in her eyes. He was the only one standing between her and the darkness. The first scream echoed through the castle just after midnight. Elara bolted upright in her guarded chamber, heart racing, every instinct screaming that danger had found her. The silver symbols on the walls flared brighter, casting ghostly light over the stone, while distant footsteps thundered through the corridors like a storm of iron and shadow. Then the door burst open. Lucien stood there, no longer calm, no longer distant royal marble, but a warrior carved from midnight flame. His crimson eyes burned brighter than ever, and thin lines of fresh blood marked his cheek. "Stay behind me," he commanded. The air trembled as dark figures poured into the hallway, cloaked in shadow, their eyes hollow and cruel. The Shadow Council, the same ones who had whispered her name like a curse. "So this is the delicate little heir," one of them sneered. "The child of the woman who dared abandon her throne." Elara's hands trembled, yet she lifted her chin. "I don't know what throne you speak of." Lucien stepped forward, placing himself fully between her and them. "She belongs under my protection. Leave now, or face consequences older than your own bloodlines." Laughter rippled through the intruders. "You protect her because she is your weakness, King Lucien, and weakness has always been your undoing." In the blink of an eye, the hallway erupted. Lucien moved like living shadow, faster than sight, his cloak slicing the air as he defended her with ruthless precision. Stone cracked, torches shattered. The sound of steel and supernatural force ripped through the mansion like thunder. Elara pressed her back against the wall, watching in stunned horror as the king fought not like a tyrant, but like someone protecting something sacred. One attacker broke through, lunging toward her with clawed hands. Terror seized her lungs, yet something deep within her flared hot and ancient. Instinct guided her trembling palms outward. A pale silver light exploded from her skin. The vampire slammed backward, as if struck by divine fire, crashing helplessly into the opposite wall. Silence fell. Everyone froze. Lucien turned slowly to her, shock cutting through his cold control. "You harnessed Moonfire." "I didn't mean to." She gasped, staring at her glowing hands as the light faded. "It just happened." Fear flickered across even the ancient council's faces. "She truly is the Moonline heir." Lucien straightened, his presence sharpening like a drawn blade. "Leave now. Before the fire, you fear learns to burn willingly." Reluctantly, the dark figures retreated, melting back into night like a poisoned tide. When silence returned, Elara slumped to the floor, shaking violently. Lucien knelt before her, his cold fingers hovering just inches from her cheek, hesitating as if afraid to touch something fragile. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice strangely gentle. "No, just scared," she whispered, tears spilling despite her efforts to stay strong. "You stood your ground," he murmured. "You saved yourself, and you saved me," she replied softly, meeting his eyes. For the first time, something raw passed between them. Not fear and power, but understanding. Brokenness, recognizing brokenness. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Lucien led her to a balcony overlooking the haunted forest, where frost kissed stone and the moon hung heavy with silent secrets. "There was a time," he said quietly, "when your mother stood here too. She pleaded for peace. She begged me not to drown the world in blood, for her sake." Elara swallowed. "Did you love her?" He did not answer immediately. his gaze fixed on the horizon as though centuries lived in that silence. Yes, he admitted at last. And losing her shattered the part of me that remembers how to feel. His eyes lowered to her. Now you stand where she once stood, and fate whispers my name again. A strange warmth fluttered in Yalara's chest. Fear and comfort tangled painfully. I'm not her, she said gently. No, Lucian agreed. You are not. His fingers brushed her hand, hesitant but sincere. You are becoming something far more dangerous to my heart. Her breath caught. The moment lingered, fragile and electric, until he stepped back, restoring the distance he feared to cross. But in that silence, something sacred had changed. She no longer saw a monster. He no longer saw a helpless girl. In the shadows of ancient power and blooming moonlight, a bond had begun, quiet, slow, inevitable. And somewhere beneath the earth, the moonline power stirred once more, sensing not just its heir, but the king who would either protect her or perish for her.
The following days passed like whispers, wrapped in velvet danger. Though the Shadow Council had retreated, their presence lingered like frost on Elara's skin. Every corridor seemed to watch her, every shadow heavy with suspicion. Whispers followed wherever she walked, moonline curse-bearer, human filth, pretending royalty. Yet none dared touch her. Not while Lucian's gaze remained sharp as a blade. He increased her protection, but never her isolation. Instead of locking her away, he began to teach her. In a hidden chamber lined with ancient symbols and glowing crystals, he stood behind her as she struggled to focus the strange energy within her veins. Do not fear it, he instructed, his voice low and steady. Moonfire answers to calm, not terror. I never asked to be powerful, she murmured, her hands shaking as a faint silver glow trembled between her palms. I just wanted a life where people didn't hurt me. Lucian's expression softened, and yet fate placed a crown of fire upon your soul. Her eyes flicked up to his. Is that what you see? A crown? A faint, almost invisible smile touched his lips. A queen in waiting. The words wrapped around her heart like dangerous warmth. No one had ever looked at her as anything more than a burden. Now the most feared king in the realm spoke of her as if she carried something sacred. That night, during the council court, the nobles gathered beneath towering obsidian pillars, their expressions sharp with disapproval. Elara stood beside Lucian, though her instinct begged her to retreat. Her worn dress had been replaced with soft silver fabric, yet she still felt like the frightened girl from the streets. She carries forbidden power. One elder vampire growled. She is human-born, unworthy of royal protection. Another spat. Lucian's presence thundered through the chamber as he rose. You mistake purity for weakness, he declared. She bled under cruelty and still chose kindness. That strength exceeds your hollow arrogance. A murmur rippled through the hall. Then a robed figure stepped forward, eyes glinting with malice. If she is truly Moonline, let her face the trial of reflection. Let her soul prove its purity. Silence fell. Elara's heart froze. What is that? Lucian turned, his jaw tightening. A mirror forged from ancient moonstone, it shows the truth of one's soul, or destroys those who hold darkness. I will do it, she said quickly, surprising even herself. I'm tired of being judged without a voice. His gaze searched her face, torn between fear and reluctant pride. This may hurt you. I've survived worse, she whispered. The mirror was unveiled tall, glowing, terrifying. As she stepped before it, memories flooded her mind. Hunger, cold, her mother's tired smiles, the insults, the loneliness, the shine of Lucien's eyes when he defended her. The crystal surface shimmered. Instead of showing corruption, the mirror bloomed with radiant silver light, forming the image of a crown made of moonlight, floating above her reflection. A gasp swept the chamber. She is pure, the moonline lives. Lucien's eyes darkened with something fierce and reverent. He stepped forward, facing the court. You will kneel, he commanded, or you will answer to your king. One by one, the nobles bent their heads. Later, on the silent balcony where the world seemed far away, Elara leaned against the stone rail, her mind aching with exhaustion. You didn't have to stand so fiercely for me, she murmured. I did, Lucien replied, his voice low and sincere. Because for the first time in centuries, my power defends something good. She turned to him, emotions trembling like fragile glass. Does that frighten you? His eyes held hers longer than before, more than any enemy ever could. A soft silence wrapped them. For a heartbeat, the distance between monster and mortal blurred into something dangerously close. His gloved hand brushed her sleeve, lingering just a moment too long. Not possession, not command. Just quiet, trembling tenderness. And Elara realized with slow, terrifying clarity, she no longer feared him. She feared how deeply she trusted him. Above them, the moon burned brighter, as if blessing what neither dared speak aloud. But far beyond the castle walls, the Shadow Council gathered once more, whispering of blood rituals and broken oaths. And in their hushed darkness, a single truth echoed with venomous certainty. If Elara lived, the Vampire King would fall. Elara sensed it before the castle bells rang, a deep ache beneath her ribs, like the pull of the moon on restless tides. She stood at her window, watching dark clouds coil like wounded beasts, when the air itself shuddered and a scream tore through the stone halls. Not fear, agony. She ran, ignoring protocol whispers and warnings. Elara sprinted through corridors until she found him, Lucien, standing in the ancient ritual chamber. His body arched in silent torment, shadows clawing at his limbs like living chains. Symbols burned around him in molten red, and the very floor trembled as if rejecting the curse he carried. Lucien, she cried, rushing forward. He turned sharply, eyes blazing with pain and fury. Stay back. A surge of dark energy blasted outward, slamming her backwards. She hit the cold stone, breath knocked from her lungs, but she forced herself up, refusing to let him face it alone. What's happening to you? Her voice shook. The curse. He rasped. The Shadow Council has invoked the blood binding. They are tearing my essence apart to force me to destroy you. Her heart clenched. You would never. I am losing control, he growled, jaw clenched, veins darkened like poison beneath pale skin. If the darkness wins, I will become what they want me to be. Your executioner. No, she whispered, stepping closer despite the deadly aura around him. You saved me. You protected me when no one else would. You are not their weapon. His eyes locked onto her, conflicted fires swirling within crimson depths. You don't understand, Ilara. My kind is forged by obedience to ancient law, and the law is screaming for your blood. Then let my power answer back, she said softly. Before he could stop her, she placed her hand over the symbol blazing on his chest. Moonfire flared, not violent, but pure, luminous, warm. The silver glow spread from her palm, weaving into his tormented form like threads of calm. Lucian gasped as the shadows recoiled, hissing in protest. Feel it, she murmured, tears slipping down her cheeks. You are not alone. You never will be again. His breathing slowed, the violent tremors eased, and when the storm inside him finally settled, he collapsed to his knees, not in defeat, but in fragile, forbidden release. Ilara caught him instinctively. In that quiet aftermath, he looked at her as if she had done what no one else had dared for centuries. You just challenged my curse, he whispered. You risked your life for a monster. You are not a monster, she said, brushing damp hair from his brow. You're a king who forgot he deserved gentleness. A dangerous silence bloomed between them. His hand rose slowly, hesitating just before touching her cheek, as if afraid she'd vanish like a memory. You do not know what you are awakening. I feel it too, she admitted softly, and it terrifies me, because it feels real. The air grew heavy, the world stilled. Then footsteps approached, sharp and cruel. A shadow council envoy appeared at the chamber arch. Eyes burning with cold triumph. Touching, he sneered. But your defiance will only make his fall more delicious. The bond between you has begun, hasn't it? A moonline heir and her cursed king. A love destined for ruin. Lucian rose, fury coiling once more, but Ilara stepped beside him, not behind. If loving him is ruin, she said, voice trembling yet fierce, then I will choose it over your darkness every single time. The envoy smirked, then prepare yourselves. At the next blood moon, your bond will be tested. One of you will not survive. With that, he vanished, leaving silence and prophecy in his wake. Lucian turned to Ilara, conflict flooding his immortal face. You have no obligation to remain in this nightmare. She met his gaze without flinching. I've lived nightmares my whole life. At least this one feels honest. The faintest ghost of a smile touched his lips. In that moment, beneath cursed stone and ancient power, the impossible truth could no longer be denied. They cared deeply, dangerously, irrevocably. And as the moon rose higher, illuminating the scarlet sky, fate whispered its cruel promise across the realm. Love would cost blood, but betrayal would cost the world. The sky blazed crimson, painting the world in the colors of prophecy and sacrifice. The castle trembled beneath the weight of ancient magic as the Shadow Council gathered in the outer courtyard, their chants rising like poison through the air. Every vampire stood frozen in fearful silence, knowing this night would decide the fate of their king, and the girl who had dared soften his immortal heart. Elara stood at the center of the moonstone circle, dressed in silver robes that shimmered like starlight. Though fear clawed at her soul, her chin remained lifted. Across from her stood Lucien, his expression torn between devotion and despair. "You should not be here," he murmured. "There is still time to run. I will not leave you to suffer alone," she replied softly. "Not now, not ever." The Shadow Council leader stepped forward, his voice dripping with cruel satisfaction. "The bond will now be tested. The Moonline Heir or the Vampire King. One soul must break for balance to be restored." Dark energy surged through the air, coiling around Lucien like iron chains. He cried out as the curse ignited anew, shadows tearing at his very essence. Elara's heart shattered at the sound of his pain. "No more," she cried. The moonlight responded. A surge of radiant silver engulfed her, her eyes glowing with celestial fire. The power within her awakened fully, not destruction but protection, born from every tear she had endured, every act of kindness she had chosen instead of bitterness. She stepped forward and placed both hands over Lucien's chest. "I choose him," she declared. "Not as a king, not as a monster, but as the soul who taught me I mattered." The air split open with violent force as moonfire clashed against the curse. Shadows screamed. Ancient symbols shattered. The Shadow Council faltered, their control slipping as light drowned out their darkness. Lucien looked at her in stunned disbelief. "You will die if you continue. Then I will die saving the only person who ever saw me as more than nothing," she whispered. Tears burned down his face, the first they had ever witnessed from an immortal ruler. With a cry torn from centuries of pain, Lucien wrapped his arms around her, shielding her as their powers intertwined. Moonlight burst upward into the heavens like a pillar of divine judgment, severing the blood binding with a sound that shook the very stars. The curse shattered, the chains dissolved. Silence fell over the realm. When the light faded, Elara collapsed into his arms, exhausted but alive. Lucien held her as though she were the most precious treasure ever forged by fate, his forehead resting gently against hers. "It's over," he breathed. "You freed me." "No," she smiled weakly. "We freed each other." The Shadow Council fled, defeated, their reign of fear ended by a single act of love and courage. From that night forward, the people no longer saw Elara as a fragile human girl, but as the Queen of Moonlight, the one who healed a broken king and restored balance to a realm drowning in cruelty. In time, Lucien ruled not with terror but compassion, and beside him walked a girl who had once begged for scraps, now crowned not by blood but by bravery. Yet Elara never forgot where she came from. She ensured the poor were protected, the weak were respected, and cruelty no longer wore privilege as armor. And when she stood upon the balcony where fate had first tangled their souls, Lucian whispered softly, "You changed everything." She smiled gently. "You just reminded me that even in darkness, kindness still matters." Under the silver moon, hand in hand, they became more than legend. They became hope.